Hey, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite retro handhelds I think I've ever, held in my hands. The Gameboy Advance SP Super Famicom Edition. So I picked this little guy up for my video about the RG35XX SP, and if you watched that video, you'll remember I used it as a bit of a point for comparison for the overall form factor and whether or not Anbernic were successful in their design. But in doing that video, and in playing around a ton with the 35XX SP, I came to find that while I certainly do love the OG Game Boy form factor and design, and I absolutely think that it still does hold up, there is just something so pleasing about a hinged device like this. Something I just can't quite put my finger on, and so I want to explore that in this video, and maybe come to some kind of conclusion about why it is that I like this and other hinged devices more than, let's call them, slab-style devices. So to begin with, we have the obvious thing, the hinge. The hinge on this is just honestly so unbelievably satisfying to use and interact with. As younger folks are coming to find out, hinged devices like this have a certain air to them that really separate them from their slab-style counterparts. Now, perhaps this is just my Trekkie showing, but I personally just get so much enjoyment out of a good hinge. And to be fair, I think you could make a strong argument that pretty much every hinged personal computer can, in one way or another, trace its roots back to this guy, the humble TOS communicator. But it's not just because this was on TV. No, plenty of things were on TV around the time that these were being made, so what is it about the hinge that made it so appealing to these designers? I mean, they designed things like flip phones and personal PDAs, personal digital PDAs around it, so what was it about this hinged style of device that was so appealing to them? Well, for one, and I'm sure you're all thinking about this already, but a good hinge is just one of the most pleasing things to open and close from a physical standpoint. There's something just so cool about the reveal moment that you get when you open a thing with a hinge, and the definitiveness of closing a hinge is something you simply can't replace with a power button. I mean, a toggle switch comes close, but still, nothing beats a good hinge. But aside from that, it's actually just a really functional piece of design, especially in the days before stuff like Gorilla Glass and other super tough engineered materials. Expensive electronics, especially those with a screen, were at great risk of being irreparably damaged with a single drop. So the addition of a hinge allows you to elegantly separate the device into two distinct states. One, for when it's in use, exposing all the sensitive bits that you have to expose in order to use the device, and one for when it's stowed away and not in use, closing off all those sensitive bits to the elements and making sure that even if you do drop it, the chances of something going catastrophically wrong are significantly decreased. So if it's such a great design, if the hinge is, as I'm making it sound, seemingly this ultimate form factor, why don't we really see it as much anymore? Well, there's a few reasons for that. For one, it's cheaper to make a slab-style device than a hinge. While a hinge is absolutely, in my humble opinion, the ultimate form factor, it adds complexity, and with complexity comes yield loss. See, when you're making a product at scale, you have to account for some degree of failed units that you simply can't sell. And it's partially the designer's job to design their product around the manufacturing constraints that a given company has. Not all factories are created equal, and if your supplier simply can't be trusted to reliably make thousands or even millions of perfectly functional hinges, it's probably going to be best to just lean on other people's inventions and license some tougher materials for those parts of your product that are at risk of being damaged. Plus, that's just one more part that you need to make, and if your product already has a really high per unit cost, any savings can really help it scale. But it's not just all money, because especially within the consumer electronics vertical, industry trends play a huge role in what designers want to design. You have to remember, at the end of the day, designers are people, and products like the iPhone aren't simply made on the whim of one auteur designer, despite what they might want you to think. So if the public sentiment is that slab devices are what's cool right now, that's likely going to influence what designers want to make. And nothing shows that quite as well as the iPhone. Ever since the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, it feels like there has been a decided shift away from devices with personality towards devices with mass market appeal. If you're going to be attempting to appeal to a really wide audience, you want your product to have as quiet of an opinion as possible. Because while you may be sacrificing some brand fanaticism in the people who actually buy your products, you gain broad appeal. It's much the same as how the music industry kind of dumbs down music to make sure that it appeals more widely. Statistically, a song is less likely to do well if it only appeals to a certain group with its messaging and themes. So if you want your song to hit it big, and I'm talking Taylor Swift big, you need to make your songs as easily digestible as possible. Now, that's not to say that you can't have opinions and express them, and many would argue that you should, but those opinions are going to be dumbed down way more than they would be if you were simply making music for music's sake. And we see that same trade-off in electronics design and the proliferation of Apple's clean, sterile design language. Now, as all things do, over the years, Apple's philosophy about this has shifted and in some ways loosened. For example, they offer colorways for almost all of their products now, and use more organic materials than just glass and stainless steel. However, they are still sticking rigidly to the concept of a monolithic slab design for their electronics. And while it is rumored that they'll be introducing folding iPhones sometime in the near-ish future, that's just a rumor at time of writing. And everything they make still sticks to that same overall design language. And that adherence and consequential commercial success, as it does, propagated out to the rest of the consumer electronics space. Because if there's one thing about consumer electronics you can rely on, it's that if Apple does it, you know for a fact everyone else will too. But wait, I can hear you shouting at your screen, what about all the folding and flipping phones from companies like Samsung, Motorola, and Huawei? Those all have hinges, so you're wrong, dumb internet man. And to that I would say, yes, you're right, dear strawman. We are, in fact, seeing a resurgence of folding and hinged devices, and in many cases, they actually do retain some of that original DNA. And that's something I absolutely love to see from these companies. Now, the implementation, I actually think could use some work, and if I'm being honest, I know for a fact that this is a wrong opinion to have, but this is my channel, so I'm going to say it anyway. I don't think folding screens are the way to go. At least not in my opinion. See, I think the current iteration of folding devices attempts to take a slab-style phone and simply graft a hinge onto it. There really isn't much thought given, in my opinion, to a more holistic approach. I think these phones would be much more interesting with dedicated buttons, dials, and switches, and simple, bisected design. Much like the device that I started this video with, the Gameboy Advance SP, with a screen on top and everything else on bottom. This, I think, would allow these phones to not only distract you less because of their much smaller screen, but also benefit way more from the positive sides of having a hinge, like having the screen be protected against the elements, which is still a major problem despite new fancy materials. Now, to be clear, I know this is absolutely a pipe dream. Not only do these companies have absolutely no incentive to unstick your eyeballs from your phone, but that's also just not what people want. People want a single do-it-all device that they can put easily in their pocket and carry around every day. And I get that. I just feel like life would be so much more interesting if everything were its own separate device and had its own separate function. And as a design-brained kind of person, I would love to see more ways for people to come up with interesting electronics designs outside of just phones, earbuds, and maybe an AI assistant. I think what it really boils down to for me, though, is that hinged devices like this just have so much more to work with, and so many more opportunities for personality than something like an iPhone, which is basically just a piece of glass with a bunch of electronics behind it. I think things like this are kind of allowed to play more, and I think that while things like the iPhone certainly work as minimalism icons, is the world we really want to live in like this? I mean, you do you, boo, but don't you want to have more of an opinion than just, like, grayish? I think I'll just leave you with this. It's okay to like things. It's okay to enjoy things. And I feel like the more minimal, sterile designs of minimalism and its neighboring styles kind of tell you that no, it's not okay to enjoy life and variety, and instead try to dictate to you what's best and what you should like with their rational rules and restrictions. And that just doesn't really vibe with me. And that's why I think these things, outside of their just inherent coolness as icons of video game and computer history, really resonate with me way more than an OG iPhone ever could. They speak to people enjoying their lives and their leisure time, whereas there's the sterility that comes with a lot of more minimal designs, I feel speak more to efficiency and maximalization of profits over maximalization of joy. But I guess I'll just leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I gave you something to think about and that you enjoyed this video. But other than that, I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope to see you here next time.